Now we're going to begin in this layer of making space across the upper zone of the body and also the mid kind of region. And I want you to get onto your block at the base. And this is something I'm still feeling like I'm trying to fine tune how to lower back in the most qualitative way for my circulation, the rhythms of circulation in the front body. So when you lower back and you're working towards this length in the front, we're actually going to start first with coordination of our core muscles. So as you lower down to the blanket, this should feel like enough easeful support underneath. But when you get a hold of your block, your belt I know is nearby, but your block, or if you're not using a block, you can have your hands still reaching overhead and imagining that that block is between them is fine. So you hold on and you have the arms reaching back with the shape wide. And then when the knees are bending, what I want you to keep is that the arms stay back the whole circulation exercise. So we'll settle our eyes, and our experience to start will be 3 variations on the core. So we're sand free, and the first thing you'll do is draw the right knee in towards the chest, and then lower that leg and foot back down with the knees bending, and alternate drawing the knee in towards the core of the body. But get a feel when you have the block overhead or your arms reaching behind you, the consideration for how to land in your mid body. So feel if you can let your eyes kind of sink back and alternate the motion of the knee, and then feeling that you have 2 sides. And how does each side respond in the hips, in the spine, circulation? Let's take the word circulation into focus today versus maybe flexibility as our prime emphasis. But we're working with improving our overall circulation. So we're starting out with a little bit of you could call this a spine walk, right? Because you're kind of strumming through the spinal column with the knees alternating in the back, reclining knee towards chest. Okay, now as you lower down that last footing, you're going to reach your hands now to hold on to your belt. And since it's a kind of reinforced layer, whatever you're holding, make sure it's a kind of a thick support between your hands, and it's between them so that when you slide your arms open, your elbows extended out, bring your feet together and your knees out like you do in a Baddha Konasana pose, a cobbler's posture. And of course, every time we shift into these class experiences, it might seem different, right? We change the patterns so that we kind of change the sequence, the diet of postures to absorb. But they're all similar, right? They may change their directions. So let's feel the direction of the feet, this time feeling like they're pushing together. And the arm bones are open, right? It's like you can kind of play with this arm pattern because it's like your leg pattern right now, but your hands aren't pushing together like your feet. But it's sort of similar in your ribs and then in your hips. So the emphasis here is widening through the rib cage and that expansion of breath in the middle. So let the diaphragm naturally expand on the in-breath. So that means that your belly feels like it goes into kind of a strengthening cycle. And on your out-breath, you'll feel as the diaphragm relaxes, the belly moves towards the spine. Okay, now we'll put these together. So you're going to let go of the belt, and then as you gradually slide your hands to the floor, let's get the legs so they both stretch straight down, and add a sandbag to either the thighs, the ribs. If you're sandless, then let it be simply right here with the natural arch of the spine. And whatever you might be using for that weight, as far as the placement, could be the front of the thighs, it could be the ribs, but select the awareness with the placement and then the stretching open of the surface layer of your structure. So it's kind of like we start with surface motions, and then we go deeper when we're in the shape for time. So you can think about these shapes as we do cycle through them, because our mind likes change, right? Even in an exercise practice, we like to have a different environment to kind of study, but think of them as kind of an accumulative effect. So we'll let this one be a little longer than the first two, but step the feet apart. And then if the legs feel like the back of the knees are kind of pressing down, can you relax your feet? And then feel the circulation in the rib cage and the chest, the length of the inhale, and the relaxation on the out breath. Give it a few more moments. And can you let the breath do the stretch? So we use the breath as a stretching tool. And it's a helpful thing to experiment with, especially when you crave to do work that's a little bit fuller postures, but you're not in a state or in a place that you can do that work. So you can work with your breath and the length of it, the continuous cycle of the breath. So we'll take a few moments with the in-breath for 4, filling the lungs. And out-breath for 5, empty. So if that felt a little speedy for the instruction, it probably takes you a little longer to do that in-breath for 4. Now bring the hands back overhead, interlacing your fingers, and turn the palms to the back of the space. And give that reach of the arms the supportive awareness through your ribs. So if I move my arms back and the hands are together, it has this effect of kind of this rib cage, right? It spans and it elongates. So we're going to play with that as we move into side sage next. So I want you to lower your hands to the sand to remove that to where it's easy to get for the next shape. And then when you slide your feet in, perk up your seat. So lift it up, perk it up. And then as you slide your block, or maybe you decide to roll to that side. And then as you go to the left, let's go left to start. So we have our blankets right next to the bolster, and I want you to push your blankets away. So you've got a sliver of space for your arm in between. And the arm is gonna go, horizontal pattern, so you're gonna slide it between the two props. But in the meantime, as you prep for that, get a ball or a towel and place it on the inside of the right leg. If that feels comfortable without, you can minus that prop. But as you move your block overhead to the blanket, now we've got a setup so that we have the option, and if you've got the round bolster, you would add that here instead of the flat one, okay? That just gives you a little bit more of a full rib stretch. And it's nice to access the height, and I like to have the round space, but this seems to be addressing everybody can go with some sort of object that's bolster flat or round. And as we experiment with this reach of the right arm, it can certainly stretch open the chest muscles, but you can feel how you can circle that right arm. And this might be the one shape that you can explore movement with, going counterclockwise or clockwise, to experiment with the motion and the field of movement of the lungs and the heart. Okay, so lengthen down from that right leg and the opposing equalizing reach of the right arm. And as it moves over, and maybe it has a landing spot on your block or your blanket, you want to be sure your head is feeling the muscles that lean down into your neck are supported. And that might be a good cue for you right now, is are your muscles in your neck feeling like they can relax? So that's about letting your head just relax into the blankets, kind of leaning into them. And the ribs moving with both sides of the breath, the in breath and the out breath. And you might spend the equal amount of energy on the out breath following that. A few more moments with this experiment with the arm. If the arm gets a little tired, like the hinge at the shoulder joint, right? If you can think about that piece of musculature, the joint, right, capsules what gets fatigued. So the key is to keep kind of loosening those areas up, right? That's warming it up. So if my arm overhead is too much, I'll bring it back open, because I know this is good behavior for my shoulder to keep the chest this position. Or if that's feeling like you'd rather let the hand relax anywhere, you can always lower the right arm down. But give it a little bit of that space for the waist. Okay, and then when we come out, I want you to let the sand slough off. And interestingly, today we're going to go in between the two poses with a cobbler's pose. So how about you take the option? Why not? So I'll kind of demo the option. Would be my first thought on this one would be using the bolster under your back. So if you got a round bolster, you probably could work with a round bolster on this one. Let's see. So have your blocks next to your legs, get your belt, and your belt's buckled up in a loop already, so you're set. And you're going to move your blankets across the mat at the back. So you got this horizontal pattern with the blankies. And then pivot the bolster to tip up. And so when I have that lift and that support of my spine, then when I turn, and the round bolster, I've seen it used for this, so you might try it, and then you can decide if you want to go back to the flat. Okay, it is kind of an interesting spine lift. So you have the belt bring overhead and around to your feet. And then as you pull the belt tighter, you want to make sure that this really reinforces that connection of the feet, but no longer is it that you're pushing them together like we did earlier. It's that you're kind of letting the inner lane of the foot to open like a new book, like you're opening it up. So you're going to put those blocks under the legs. And then when you're adjusting your spine back, be clear that you're letting your back muscles go into a little bit of that rounded pattern. And then when you lower and you reach through the ribs and you let your head lower down, send the hands to get a sandbag, hand sand, okay, across the base of the sternum. So it's pretty high up, really, with the sand for the breathing muscles. So it kind of feels a little bit intrusive in some ways with the sand support. But you kind of get a feel once that sand is laid to rest, you can move your arms to an open level and then let the shoulders kind of press back and move the chest So it seems like it's horizontal breath 101, right? So you're working with that span of the breath in the mid body and letting the class experience now move you into that centerpiece pose. Let the brain relax. Feel the abdomen move with the breath. And let the shoulders also find where they're receiving some positive circulation. As long as it's not difficult for you, if this feels painful to move your shoulders back in this orientation, then you'll likely need some more height under your head because it's a bit of a chest opener. If you're adapted to this type of movement by now, you've made some good improvements with the circulation in your lungs and to your heart, besides the muscles and the joints. Okay, so following the motion of the breath, give it a few moments. And with the back muscles in this natural arch, can you eventually feel how the shoulders move back to the bolster? But at some point, it's essential if you're restoring or regenerating that you let that habit form of the movement of the shoulders, kind of let it become like a bit of a muscle memory versus a repeated in concentration for you. So letting go. And some of it may take up habit. Good. So breathing slow, in breath. Follow the out breath. Relax the throat. Now moving the sand and stay a bit in this kind of land of structural bliss, right? Because the bone structure is likely, if you have this kind of habit, to help the spine and the strength of the spine as much as the lungs. And so when we shift and we unbuckle, that's the key here, is to kind of get that belt unbuckled, or if it's a little tricky and you can't quite find that, then try to start to slide out, sneak your legs out of that belt. And then bring the left knee to point up and cross the right ankle to the left knee and lean your body weight. I would use something soft under that left thigh, maybe a ball, or maybe you can get away with a block because likely you have something that's a softer block versus a cement block. Okay. And then when you hold on to that right knee, you can look at some very old yoga videos where they're using those kinds of blocks and think, geez, kind of getting away with some ease here. Geez, this is easy. Okay, hold on to that right knee with the left hand and prompt the blood flow into the right hip. So it's kind of what's up. It's pretty basic. We're doing some very standard things for circulation. So as that hand holds onto that right knee, if you notice the ball is higher up on the hip and you kind of squish it, you mush it, and you find it's a little more comfortable to hold the knee, then you might take that. Now, I would prefer that you feel stable in the lower back muscles than swinging the knee too far over. Okay, now feel when you change sides. This will be a short one, so we'll uncross, then cross the left leg to the right knee, and then add the ball or block outside the right leg, right besides it. So I'm pointing to my left side, but now I'm doing the ball over on the right side, or if you have the block or a towel, And then you're kind of working with this shifting, right? It's a little bit of a zigzag motion with the leg. And then hold on to that left knee with the right hand and balance the circulation through the left outer leg, the lateral rotator into the hip itself, which is sort of a complicated topic where this leads into a hip, into a pelvis. But when you're holding onto that knee, your left arm could be passive, it could be semi-active by reaching it besides your head. And this will be the leg we move into that side sage on the second hip with in a moment. So this is kind of a nice blend of postural patterns. Okay, now lower that left arm if it's up and then shift your knees back center. Both of them are uncrossing, and now we're going to move any object we have that we're using, the ball or the block, a little bit out to the side, and then you'll feel what it's like to roll your ribs. You know, if I'm on my back and I kind of let my knees dash over to the right, I've got to feel if I can move into my ribs, not just kind of push with my arms. So, you know, be a little curious how you move your ribs on your props. And then you've got to eventually help yourself up. So as I face this way, what we're doing is now turning our sage pose to the right hip down and pivot. Now the blankets could be this way on the second side. There's nothing that says that you have to have them straight. I'm just trying to shift things up a lot so that you have these options. So if you want to be the same, you'll just turn your blankets like so. And then add in that ball, that block, and the sand, and then you're already setting yourself to that second side. So the right hip is down, and if you push your sand down to your hip, it helps feature this length in your side, but I find side bending is what we're gonna kind of actually focus on a little bit coming up here, but now we're in it. We're in the side bend patterns. So this is helpful for my back muscles, right, to ease my back. So the paraspinals, and then the rib cage, and that reach overhead with the left hand. So can you let the right knee feel its full bend, and the left side lengthen? And then with the weight of your head on the blankets, now kind of tease the breath through the sides. Now, if you're going to evoke concentration for your shape, let the breath be a major field of attention here. So it's like, I know the landscape is not, the visual is you're in your body, like working through the shapes, but center, maybe your eyes closed, and then feeling that large experience of the breath expanding and releasing. You'll truly give it a few moments here. Yeah, and check in with what part of your side do you feel? Is it like, is it too simplified for you to give a specific marker of where the most pull is? But what we're going to work towards is getting this experience through our back and into our hip. Okay, so let your head relax into the blankets. Roll a bit to that right side. And then if you have that block you're dependent on overhead, move it over to the side, and then maybe stretch your arm open. Before you come up, so feel how this rib movement here, right? We're going to try to encapsulate this when we sit in a moment. So when you're on your side, you kind of just let your whole structure kind of spill open, right? So when you come up, this leg, right, this whole side pattern, we're gonna come up to sitting on our bolster. And we're not gonna lose any of this. So I want you to sit on a flat bolster, that's important. And then use something under that left knee, whether it's a ball or a block, and add on a sand to the upper thigh if you have sand. Okay. So we're keeping on this side. Okay. So I've got a belt. I don't know if I want to use the belt. I'm kind of not privy to that these days, but for this pose. So let's go with a block. Okay. We all have something. If you would prefer to use a belt, you would place it under your right foot and pull, right? So that would be another wave of movement. So now as I lean down to that block on the right side, or I'm holding with my belt, I've got my right leg straight and the left knee bending, it's perked up with something under the knee. And now this left side that we were just reaching with, I want you to get a feel for the position of the pelvis now seated, and then you're leading out of the side wave of the waistband. And that left arm could be either up, head turns to look down to the right leg or down to the block, that area, or the left arm is behind you, which is my preference because my shoulder is feeling plenty of energy flowing through it. So you be the decider how much energy you're going to pull into the shoulder joint. Okay, and balance the breathing with the side motion. So trying to feel the ribs expand, and you can get touchy with it, right? You could put your left hand on your waist and notice where you get the rib sensation. It's, it's not very low because there's no ribs down here, but you'll feel where the experience kind of blossoms in the sides. And then once you find where your left arm is comfortable, literally, feel the experience out of the spine with the expansion of the breath. So it's not just held in the belly, but it moves out of the whole centerpiece of the body, navel center. Okay, now with this process of leaning, I admit I get kind of lost without using a belt every time on this one. So what we're doing is really feeling the structural support. So when you bring the left arm down to the back at this point, and then when you come up, I want you to bring your right hand to the left leg and get a hold of the leg or the knee. And I'm going to try to get the knee because it gives my right side of my back something to aim for. And the knee is coming up off of the object under it, right? So it's kind of starting to not get as push, it doesn't push down as easy. So reach the left hand back to the blanket or around your waist and feel that rotation. And I want you to emphasize here, since we're doing so many balancing shapes in our mid body and our stomach strength. And then we're going to unwind, come forward. It's pretty quick. We'll move anything away from under the left knee. And then we'll take the right leg and actually cross it over the left leg. And then go into the real twist, right? Not that that was false, but now we're going to work on our leg bands, right? They kind of hold the shape to center. And then turn to your right and bring that left elbow to the right leg. And certainly find that bundle of rotation and play with how this left arm can facilitate some awareness of moving into the twist. Yeah, and be cautious how much you might tend to be forceful with the arm. And the concentration is to be gentle, use your forces of grounding with the leg, with the feet, and the tailbone. And then with the mind, perhaps busy in all directions, maybe closing the eyes. And feeling some opportunity to give the body time to absorb the pose. So there's concentration. Okay, relax your pressure with the arms. Come back to front and we'll do one final shape on this side. So I want you to bend through that right knee's gonna unhook from the leg and then putting that right foot either on the floor in a simple cross-legged position, moving your sand to your right thigh, or you could put your right foot on top of a block, right? This is another option. If it's a little cranky in the knee and you don't like that position with the foot on the ground, try a block and see if that helps. Or your second bolster, some of you have that second cushion, you could use that under your foot. But for this pattern, we're gonna bring the arms, so they actually, let's see, what might be helpful is take you can have a belt with your hands overhead or you can have a block, since I know we're not all the same props, but as you move your arms up overhead, so it's gotta be right up over your head. Okay. Maybe a belt is better so you don't drop the block on your head, but who knows? So I bring the hands moving back, whether it's holding a belt or a block, and I'm bending the elbows. Yeah, the block makes this a little bit more concentrated and clear, right, with the elbow movement, but you can still bend your elbows with holding a belt. Okay, now with that concentration in your back, now we're going to move that block and or our hands on the ground to the top left corner of your space and lean into it. So let your spine go into more of a C shape, and meaning the letter C versus the ocean. But as you, it could be a little bit C-like, right, with the movement. Seahorse. Okay. So that left knee might still be a little bit up. So instead of putting anything under it, you might scoot your left foot closer to your bolster. And then encourage the reach of the brain towards the left top corner of your space. So it's like 11 o'clock, right? Well, it actually is 11 o'clock here, 11-ish. And with our pose as well. So lean into it. All right, my room got a little brighter. I was starting to think I was gonna have to turn the big light on. So lean so your back has that shape of releasing. So the benefit is in the hip. Okay, and now you're going to move your blocks to the front and take your hands onto your legs, sand as leg, and come up and then push the left leg, or stretch it, not push it, stretch the leg out into the left side. Turn your focus to the right leg, so I've got sand on it, right? And then I'll take my block or my hand right besides that left leg and I'll lean down. And now you might put your block up to the highest setting or your arm onto something that has some support. And now you're going to twist to the right and let that right arm reach over the side of your face. Balance the reach, right? So this back view can be sometimes useful so that you can sense that it's this spreading of circulation in your spine sides, right, your paraspinals, and then it opens out into the waist and the whole rib reach is broad. So arm goes over. If your arm fatigues, but you don't feel like it tingles or it goes numb, it's tired, right? See if you can sustain that for a little bit, just feeling that reach with the arm, that open quality, right? We're not trying to get the hands to clap, but you're feeling the rib cage expand. Maybe your head turns down towards the left side. Yeah, experience it for the waist. And then keep it simple. We're going to bring the right arm to stretch back and the left hand to the right knee and turn. Yeah, now that side felt a lot of difference for me because I didn't use the ball under the knee. So I have to admit that was a little off. So I think props are good. Just use them to support your base. So when you pivot in the rib cage, feel the rotation in the shoulder. Both arms are working their way around. And now center the mind in the center piece of the spine. So kind of notice where your central movement is. Maybe it's a little lower than the shoulder blades. So when you unwind and you prep for the second twist, you're going to likely pull your right foot in closer to the bolster and then cross the left leg over. So the left foot is stepped on the outside of the right knee on the floor. Okay. And then when you move the right arm to that left leg, you're going to create that rotation. And I imagine for you, it's probably below that centerpiece that you had the mind towards. But let it be so that the abdomen, but actually what happens, right, is the diaphragm muscle is relaxing here, right? It feels like it is. But when you're turning, your left hand comes back into a place of support, even if it's kind of mild. Fingers might have to stretch open, spider the fingers, and then feel the movement of the right arm to control the balance in the center of the twist. It's kind of a spine balance pose, right? If you kind of completely relax all your muscles and you let go, it wouldn't look a very promising twist. So you want to find that you're using some muscles in the right side of your back to orient that rotation into the stomach muscles. Good. It's an easy one to do for like 30 seconds, but once you add on 1 to 2 minutes, it can be taxing for the lungs. So take a few more slow, deep breaths. Great. Yeah, what I can see looks great, especially with that circulation in the shoulder joint here. And the core has to go along. Core along. Okay, unwind. Let the left foot slide forward. So that knee kind of goes away from that pull, because this motion of the knee up, right, is ideally you feel this is a little bit of a hip stretch when you twist, but I find that kind of comes and goes. It's not like a main hip thing, but when you put your sand now on that left leg that you were just pulled up, it might absorb a little bit of what you were doing. So it's kind of a cumulative effect in the hip. So when the knees are in this open shape and that sand is now on that left leg, then we're going to shift our arms. I know we did some arm patterns with the block and all that, but this side, we'll simplify it. So lift up through the rib cage. So hands could be on the bolster on you, right? Just to ground you. And then lift up in the ribs. What do you think lifting the ribs? Is it trying to push into your seat? Is it trying to move your shoulders back? It's both of those. And then when you move the shoulders back, also you're going to tip forward from the pelvis and then take the blocks over to the right, or the hands could also be on the floor. They don't have to be on blocks. And you're going to let the spine do its C shape and then let your head shift down. And notice the balance, because we're going to blend this one into pigeon pose today. So it'll be kind of a fun circulation rhythm in the hip. So notice the hip on that left side, how it's influenced. And if the joints, or if you just have sensations that things are vulnerable in this position, I would kind of call that to your attention and Notice if you can work your core body to move and support those areas to release. Okay, now we're going to go right to the pigeon pattern. So we're going to take the blocks back to the front and move the sand away and sneak into this pose after you get your blankets moved. So we're going to move our blankets. Let's see, I think we'll do it basic. Yeah, we played a bit with the blankets lengthwise behind us. We'll go back to the classic. So we're going to turn one blanket so it's right flat horizontal behind your bolster. If you've got a belt kind of lingering somewhere in an awkward place, you might put it aside, and the right leg is forward, the left leg is back. And then when we kind of, it's like we're seizing into that right hip, right? We're gripping it a little bit too, like a sponge, right? You're kind of holding on to it and pushing out some of that circulation, stagnation, you could say stagnation in the hip. So lean down to the arms on the floor or the blocks and let the pose become a little bit more downwards with the upper body versus trying to flow the chest up. So working specifically through your right hip. The back leg can bend. That might be really interesting for your hip and the leg in the front. Maybe that right foot kind of pulls into the bolster, but feel that left leg bending. If you can do that, give it a try today. And no need to hold your back foot or anything, but feeling that that delivers a very specific circulation in the joint. Okay, so that stagnation, if you feel like some pulling and you feel the hip stretching, then that's like, oh, there's some stagnation, and I'm going to try to drain that out. So I would keep with that awareness as you assess moving back. Okay, because we can't really get both sides at the same time for this type of a deep stretch. So we're going to have some in-between shapes before the second pigeon. So lower the left foot if it's up, hook the toes under on the back leg, and then we'll push the blocks aside off of the mat. So you'll have some clear options here with your hands to help support you to move back into some sort of a down dog pattern. So lift up the right leg, step the right foot back, and then alternate bending your knees and feel that flow of movement for your calves. You know, it's kind of different every time you move into some of these shapes. Where you feel the significance could be different each time. Maybe some days you feel the back of the upper legs in this pose, some days you feel more lower. So once you connect into the down dog pose, I want you to try to make it a pretty long down dog, right? So dachshund dog. Okay, so you want to feel as if your arms can reach forward and your seat reaches back, but feel the belly motion in and up and head down. Okay, so it's a balancing pose for your muscles. Lower your knees so we can reset our props. Turn your bolster so it points forward, it aims forward. And then when we come to cat pose, you want to feel your core kind of scoop up. So as the hands stretch open, we let the toes relax and round our back, chin towards chest. Inhale, arch. Feel the hips shift and the chest move forward. Lift up the eyes. Exhale, round your back. Chin moves gently to the chest. Inhale. Arch the back, and then take a few more of these patterns on your own pace, maybe 2 to 3. And experiment with how your upper body feels as far as its balance, or the coordination of movement creates an evenness in the muscles on the upper body. Okay, now let's try coming into dog pose with the toes under, lifting the knees. And then when you stretch back your heels, maybe you have to lift up your heels quite a bit to get that reach back through your legs and lower them downwards. And some of you might be parking your head closer to the bolster. This would be a little more restorative down dog. So let's say you're kind of close to that, but you're not there. You can add a blanket, or you could take the blanket so it's a little higher as well. And then take your restorative downward dog. Okay, so it's an inversion. And walk your hands to your feet, or your feet also towards your hands. So you kind of find yourself in a standing forward fold. Okay, so my ribs are moving towards my legs, and my spine is dangling from the pelvis. And let your head relax down from the spinal column. And your arms could be holding the elbows. Hands could also hold the back of the legs, and a blend of the both might be best for you. In this next minute, we're going to move through a medley of holding elbows or holding the legs, and then explore the circulation of the spine, gently stretching and then releasing tension in the shoulders, the neck, the back. So maybe your arms are best off completely relaxing down, not holding anything with the hands. And with the spine releasing, let your knees bend. Yeah, the most basic forward bend you could source out here. It's almost like a little bit of a child's pose, but there's no knee pressure with it, right? I'm not sitting on my knees and kneeling into anything. No kneeling pose here. Okay, now the feet could be wider. I sense most of us could probably work on that stance of widening out the feet, even though they still want to be parallel toes forwards. Okay, take a little snapshot of this in your body, like a muscle memory. So when we do legs up the wall, you kind of have something that we might come back to in our mind of concentration, but feeling the seat lifting up. Okay, now as you start to bring your hands forward on to the floor, you might have to bend your knees. And then, it's awkward, right? It's not the easiest pattern to get to from 2 feet to the all fours position. But when you arrive down, we're going to step the right foot to the top corner. And if this movement requires you to do like a little bit more between the two sides, like lay on the bolster, that's okay. But feeling the top of the back thigh on the support. Now I've got a blanket on top of my bolster, so it's like extra comfortable actually. So I'll take it. But then it's more length for my arms to try to find, right? So I feel a little bit shorter than I ought to already feel, but I'll working with the legs. Okay, so feel the waist, try to stretch through the center. And then shift back onto that left knee. So I'm going to let the toes rest on my back foot. And then we're going to come into a prone position. So I'll keep the blanket because I'm curious about how my body maintains support. So as I lower down on my bolster, elbows on the floor. Yeah, you got to work a little harder if you're short on this one to have your forearms on the ground. So if it works, it works. If it doesn't, maybe it is a stimulating position for being short here. So I'm trying to keep my elbows on the ground and work on my lungs. And for most of us, this is a challenging shape to do the breath pace with, the 4 count in breath. So you give it a try. It's an arched prone position, right? So it's not completely out to lunge yet. So feel the knees separated. Feel the weight in the mid-body. And then I want you to slide your hands back so they're pretty much under your shoulders. And as your elbows are simply drifting back, you're gonna lift up the chest and then come up dog. There we go. So that's kind of a nice way to get into up dog. The more the props under your core, the easier it is to get into this. So it feels pretty helpful to have that blanket, actually. It's nice to learn new things. Okay, now once you've stabilized the strength in your shoulders and your upper back, I want you to lower down really slow. So let's say your wrists are feeling this, then you're gonna take your hands out a little bit and maybe turn the fingers out, okay? So if the wrists are feeling, can't do this slow, then you shift your hands. But you'll lower down and feel how the spine unloads. Okay, now the ribs get a little more load. It has a little bit on the chest, so that takes you a moment to assess. And then as your toes hook under, you're going to turn your fingers back forward, but also slide them back so that you can get enough under you to get up. So as you push your hips back, this usually works best. So I just push my hips back, bring my knees in the center, and then step the left foot to the top corner and let the right thigh slide down on top of the bolster and blanket. For me, I'm using both. Yeah, so we have the arms basically straight. You know, we don't want to put the elbows down entirely on this pose, and support the quadricep stretch. This is a nice prep for pigeon on the second side. So that inner thigh gets quite a bit of openness, but it's rather balanced, right? It's not projecting too much movement in your knee joint, even though the foot's turned out a little on that left leg. Any movement might feel good, kind of shifting. And then with that arch in the spine, keep it mellow, back knee bends. For some of us, we kind of move the foot up, and once you slide that back, if you've got a difference in one knee to the other, and maybe this side has the grippiness of kind of a, you know, it feels like the knee gets tighter with this movement, then you want to kind of move it up halfway to use your hamstring, like a hamstring curl, right? Same kind of thing, right? But strengthening around the knee. And then once that leg lowers down, it does feel different from one side to the next, likely. You're gonna let your toes hook under to shift your hips back, and then remove the blanket and turn the bolster. Okay, so we're coming back to pigeon with the other side. Walk the left foot across the mat to the right side of your mat, and then lead your left knee open. It's turned out all the way from the outer root of your hip, your sitting bone, into the outer side of the knee. And then use your blocks. I'm using more props, just trying to give myself the benefit of support. And then as you angle that hip open, see if you can aim the centerpiece of your body towards the floor. This is where we did the leg bend, right? This is where we did more of this. So the foot coming up. So you might notice, does it feel different from my lunge than when I'm in pigeon? Is it easier in pigeon, right, than the lunge to bend the back knee? I'm assuming it probably is easier to bend your back knee in pigeon, if at all. Yeah, so lengthen the front of the right thigh. Whether the foot is on the floor or the foot is lifted, either is fine. So stay with that steady awareness in your spine to your brain stem, lowering your head a little bit. Now with that motion in the back, now that the body's going to shift to a inversion, I want you to explore that momentum of your head shifting down and the kind of the dome in the back. Right? It's not something that we're looking to create as a back dome. Okay. So when you come up and you now take that dome out, we're going to move that right leg forward, and I want us to do brain float today for a couple of reasons. So what we'll do is we'll take our blocks to the side and we'll sit in the middle of the bolster towards the front. We're on a flat bolster. We're going to push the blankie back, get a belt, get a sandbag if you have that nearby, and then lower onto your back so that your head is supported on a blanket, right? So you've got that simple pattern with your knees up, and you could segue into this one where you start with that perked up knee balance. I mean, I don't really think of this as a balance, but it is for your knees. They have to do some work here. But once I get my sand, we're going to place it on the top of the left thigh. And then the right leg, when it moves up, take a belt. You might as well get it prepped. So if you have it to a loop before you get your leg up, might be useful, loopful. Okay. So under your foot, and then off you go, up with your foot. Go into it. And then as that belt is probably needing to be sized up for you, you'll take the belt and make sure it's plenty loose, right? We don't want to make this uncomfortable for our neck. So I set my spine up on that bolster, and then I take the belt to the occiput, right? So it's going to be that bulge at the back of your head, right? Where you can feel that brain ledge. And after you do this so many times, you'll get kind of used to where to put your belt for brain float. It has its own little hook spot, it seems. It's a little bit of a ledge. But this belt's too short for me on this one. So, every day is a little different with how your leg responds, I suppose. Time of day is going to make it different. So use your belt so that it feels like, oh, that's supporting. I feel like I get some traction, but it's not difficult on my leg, right? So I find that the leg position on the left leg is where you're comfortable. It might be turned out, it might be stepped a little bit out, but let that right leg lift up, stay supported, and then move your arms open. Any props that are kind of in your way, you're going to shift them so you have complete space besides your shoulders. And then come into brain float. Feel if you can create some interesting traction in your leg as well. So for some of us, we might feel the circulation in the back of the leg kind of builds, depending on if we're pushing the foot forward or if we just kind of hang back in it, which would be ideal. You could just let gravity have you and your head relaxes back into the belt. Belly moves with the breath. Keep that right foot lifted, and lifted means the back of the leg is energetically moving against gravity. Let that left leg stay kind of on that front slide down. So I'm going to simply move my sand off the left leg. And now it's the left leg's going to bend, draw the knee pointing up. I want you to then at that moment really push into that right foot, and then be as caring as you can with the switch over. So when the left foot comes up into the belt, it's a different hamstring. It's not likely the exact same exactness on not just the leg, but even that hip or that left side of your body or your neck. So give yourself a few moments to center the opportunity through the left leg. And then maybe you add your sand to the right leg. Right? So the front of the right thigh has some weight on it, and it is moved down. So the thigh band, when it has pressure, it advances the circulation in the left leg. It gives it a little bit more juice. Yeah, and that right leg, we always have an opportunity to improve on this one. So you might find that all of these poses can go just a little bit more, but you're kind of lying in your experience with it. So accepting, breathing, and feeling how the shoulders center back. Try to evenly let the abdomen move on the second side. But this is certainly a meditation on shapes, right? It's not a very fast moving sequence. So like I mentioned in the beginning, try to let the body really center into the supported experience with the props. You know, if the whole time this pose feels kind of active for me, it's feeling the whole time it's active. Like I feel my leg, left hamstring. I feel the little bit of positional lift with my head. My neck has traction, but I feel it. It's not like a sleeping position right this second. There's some stuff I'd like to loosen and see if I can get the inversion to be calming. So we'll move our sand and we'll let both feet go up, but what you'll need is to get your belt with your hands first, slide it off the back of your head so your head is on the blanket, and then the hands hold the belt and slide the right foot up into the belt and push the feet out. Now you can do two versions of this. Either the belt is sealed, right? So you have a loop, and then you let your arms release open for that horizontal breath. So the feet are wide, okay? Version one. And the second one would be to bend the knees. Hold on to the belt, the piece closest to you, or double up, you could get both. And then feel the elbows on the inside of the leg, right? Whatever part it touches, it might be just the knee. And then as you feel that circulation, right? And the next option would be I unbuckle the belt, which I kind of like this one lately, just for variety. And then I hold the belt with both hands, right? They each get a piece of the belt. And then the feet just simply push up. And I find this for some reason to be pretty nice. I think it's because the feet don't mold around the belt when it's connected in the center. It has a different movement of the foot to hold the shape. It's pretty darn subtle though. I mean, you'd have to analyze it with a tooth and comb on that one, but get a feel with your feet pushing a little forward into the belt, whether you're holding on to any of these variations. You're pushing forward to stimulate that lower core band. It shouldn't hurt the back, right? If it hurts your back, then your legs need to be a little bit farther straight up and back towards your upper body. Okay, now we're going to slide the feet together. And as you bend the knees, you're going to get your belt off the feet. And we've got a few important things to experience here. So what I want you to do is feel when the knees are balancing again. Yeah, so it is kind of like a balance for the knees, but we're going to add something between them. So you either have a ball or a block, whatever's nearby. And if you have neither of those things, you don't need to add anything. So I'm going to put something between the knees. So it's the smallest setting. It's whatever's nearby because the ball went somewhere else. So the knees are in and the hands are on the bolster, and you're going to push the bolster forward. And once that spine into the pelvis centers on the floor, I put my feet on my bolster. My knees are not floating anymore. They're not like balancing. They're in operation mode here. So I'm working with them, not a little operation, but they're busy. So when I squeeze into the block, or if you're working on lifting up the hips, can simply keep the legs in that track. Keep your hips lifting, right? And so hips get the brunt of our core control, right? I mean, they're in the side lanes of the area that we most want to kind of control. Interesting. So when you keep lifting the hips up, I want you to let the arms move back, however they go, just let them be. And then once your spine lowers, I want you to really feel how your spine gradually moves and centers on the back of the pelvis, and then relax your arms and feel how your spine keeps moving, right? How you do like a cat-cow here. And then you spine tracking down, hips lift up and arms go overhead. So take these motions, we're going to keep it pure and simple drawbridge. But the place that you might be starting to make some more connections with could be the very end part of that shape. So in the beginning, so when you lift up your hips, you're motioning your arms back, but there is a heck of a lot of energy that moves through the low back into the pelvis to get the hips to lift. And I think to get them to lift without discomfort is where we're trying to operate. So when I lower down, it's this final tap down of my tailbone. I want to slow it down and hover just a little teeny bit. And then once I get that tailbone down, then the hands, and then there's that mild arch, kind of like a little tilt. Okay, so play with that to strengthen your, well, it's a pelvic reset is what that's doing, but controlling in the pelvic floor. And if there's something between the knees, it helps that a little bit more, right? Reinforces that pelvic floor strength. Okay, now last time there. Now we're going to bring the knees in and take the item between them away. And then I want you to move your bolster. Today, we're going to move it to the right. I think it's best to do this formula for this piece, this final part. So we have the spine is lifting and lowering. If you feel like, well, I'm here and I want to do that bridge pose again without the block, and kind of feel where your back muscles, these lower back muscles, if you kind of slide your hands to that space, you really want that whole frame to be really strong. Your paraspinals, your posterior core would probably be the key. That's the better language for that. So when I lower the spine and I stretch my right leg down, I'm going to cross the left leg to the bolster. And as I put a sandbag on that outer leg, if you have a ball, you place it at the sacrum, but you stretch your left arm open. Okay. And I encourage you to use a ball because it is really helpful to anchor your sacrum. So if you don't have one of these and you have something that looks a little bit like this around, you know, I don't know if you have to probably go to the kids section to find these kinds of things, right? Not the cooking section. So when you have that leg crossed over, that left leg, you want to find where the sand could bring some balance. And if you don't have sand, that's okay. You'll still receive a stretch. But with that support, right, the sand is very grounding and it creates traction for the muscle. It's really pretty straightforward what it's doing. But with that left arm stretching wide, the chest and the collarbones basically counterspin open. And give it a few moments, right? We're going to spend the last three poses, we're going to be here, each side, and then we're going to do legs up. So it'll be a really potent kind of ending with the practice. So we have a few moments here with this shape. So I want you to collect your concentration in the back, wave into the hip wave, and then let the breath flow real comfortable. And making it the experience maybe calming. Right? This all might be kind of sleepy posing at the end since you're on your back. But restoring the body to receive wellness, right? To create an environment that can be optimal for wellness, circulation boosting. You know, when you do start to switch the side, be cognizant of the very base of the spine. If you've got a ball, move that. But as the sand is tracking, right, your back, you want to kind of have a little bit of a muscle memory, how far you put your left leg over to the bolster, how far your back had to stretch to do that. So when you switch sides, you want to have a pretty good balance. So I would be kind of swift on that switch over, knees bending, pointing up, and then on your back, switch the bolster to the other side. And then once you balance your left leg straight down, the right leg crosses to the left, the ball, or not, and the sand, or not. Feel where the waist turns and where the shoulder on that right side lowers down. And let's say you get into these poses after some years that it's easy to get into some and you wonder if you should repeat them or advance. You know, see if you can work on the subtle yoga, right? Not pushing the edge, but finding where you're comfortable. And then maybe those areas that get a lot of residue to work on softening, like your neck, your throat, your facial muscles, right? They can get quite a bit of stagnation. And letting your head turn to the right. So breathing in through the nose, releasing out through the mouth. Feel that strong connection into your hip. Sometimes circulation building poses are also strength fielding, right? You can feel the strength field from that circulation. You know, we're not really doing any in-between shapes, right? We're just keeping the potent positions. So when you move the ball and we get ready to take our legs up, it's that passage into that next shape that's critical so that your circulation in your body is not just your organs, but your structure is not jolted. So we take the sand away and the ball, and then we're going to move over to one side. So I would get kind of circular, right? Rotate, push. And then if you have a wall space or a couch or a bed that you can put your legs up, you're going to take yourself to that space in your practice room, and you'll have an extra prop with you, maybe your sand. But I want you to try to get your, well, if it's a couch, it's probably not going to be as easy to get your sitting bones on it, but you can be creative, I think. But when you come upside down to get your legs up, you want to get your rear as close to the wall, like you're trying to sit on the wall, like you're trying to get your sitting bones to the wall. You don't have to get too obnoxious about it, but you're trying to sit to the wall. And then you're going to roll an arm under and then roll and you swing the legs up. The closer you get your rear to the wall, the likelihood like this, you'll fall to the other side. So you adjust and it's a little awkward, but you'll get there. And it's such benefit to your overall health to get your legs upside down, this full lift. It's worth it for your heart and your lungs and mostly your brain, right? As far as the flow to the brain. So what I want you to work with here, the hemodynamics that we're working with, moving the blood from the extremities to the vital organs, all of this vitality. And you can add your sand to your feet because, you know, that improves that flow. If you have any hardware on your face, like glasses, you'll remove those. And you'll feel where the neck circulation is pretty heavy, right? So the weight of holding your head, it's like it pushes down on your fingers. So try to get your fingers to the back of the skull and see if you can get those bony processes to release down. It's kind of fun sometimes to poke your fingers in towards the cranium and then just get that to settle down. Maybe nod your head into the fingers and then stretch open the elbows in cactus. And feeling how the diaphragm moves with the in-breath against gravity. Resting the organs from gravity's downward pull. So guiding the breath's movement. And reversing your flow of maybe expectation, right? This is the final pose. So depending on where you've been mentally, and it can be more challenging at home, right? Because there's the environment there, but give these moments some timing of experiencing your breath and feeling where the legs are cooperating in balance with the sand or not, and accepting where you are with grace. Swallow to clear the palate. Rest your tailbone. So if you're feeling like you're efforting, like trying to get the back of the pelvis pushing, feel the flex of your feet and just let the legs almost imagine that they climb up a little bit at the heel. They kind of lift up, the heels flow up, the toes flow down, the calves stretch. Now enjoy that soft belly, right? The benefit you get in the circulation to the organs. And in the next moment, we're going to shift our sand. So if you happen to have that on your feet, bend your knees and, remove it with a little muscle to get that away. And clutch the back of the legs connection in towards your rib cage. You can put your feet on the wall. You can hug the legs in, whatever feels comfortable is great. But give yourself a few moments here with this position before you roll yourself up and jump up. However you can accumulate that length in your spine. Now with a rolling pattern, maybe you rock a little side to side before you feature that full movement. You're going to come up and then take a seat so we can join in a moment of kind of this collective, even if it just seems like a connection towards the teaching or however the movements were motioning in your body, but also your mind. So we kind of collect that consciousness in the final position here. So feel where your hips center down from your waist and how your spine is lifted out of the pelvic basin, right? It's kind of like it's like a pot. right? The pelvic pot. And then let your hands slide up and motion them together, brain bowing to the heart center. Position here for a moment of thorough gratitude for your self-acceptance inwards. Inhale, and with exhale, with grace, bowing into your heart. Thank you for joining me. Namaste.